Hey traders, welcome back to the weekly Forex Forecast. Last week we had another winning week in the GMT members area with the real-time setups, and it was another week we focused on risk-off setups. In other words, those Forex pairs which can benefit from bearishness or a sell-off in US equities. You see the flows coming into certain markets. Now, these kind of regimes can last for weeks, even months at a time. So there's no need to try and fix something this week that isn't broken. I'm going to be focused once again on the risk-off setups, on those risk-off pairs for my primary watch list opportunities heading into this week. So kicking off with euro dollar, it's the inverse of the dollar index just to see what's going on here. And last week I did highlight in Saturday's video in the previous weekly Forex forecast that euro dollar is extremely overbought on a quantitative basis. Now, what does that mean? In the weekly time horizon, it means that any kind of attempt higher in euro dollar is likely going to be met with extreme resistance and is going to struggle. So euro dollar can push a bit higher. It is overall a bullish market, but it's so extended now that really upside is limited. And it doesn't surprise me that we failed to break the highs last week because we are so overbought on a rolling weekly basis. And until this washes out, this sentiment, and these bars turn back to gray, this market is likely to struggle for any upside and actually is at risk of snapping back quite sharply. So going into next week, we are still extremely overbought on a rolling weekly basis. This market needs more time to digest this previous move. So I would not want to trade this intra-week. I do on balance favor euro dollar longs. However, I wouldn't do it intra-week. I would have to see this pulling back, trading below the 1.1246, which many of you will know as the buy zone. So this is where we become oversold during the week, and we become extremely oversold below this level. And between these two levels is the buy zone. It's the area where if we trade into this during the week, and of course these levels update every single weekend, but if we trade into this during the week, the odds of reversing and snapping back are significant. So I don't really want to be trading this intra-week. If it does pull back and we start to settle down in this area, I would be interested in potential long opportunity. However, this is so overextended to the upside that if we manage somehow to push all the way through and become even more extended and take out the 1.15403, because this is in line with risk off, in other words, if you see stock selling off, you should start to see the dollar outperforming other markets, although it hasn't yet. You could make the case for, a potential short from above here as well. So it's one of those markets that you could actually trade both ways. Now, when we go through the video, every single pair that I'm going to be looking at will have a specific directional bias. I can either be short or do nothing, or be long or do nothing. In euro dollar, you can look at it both ways. I don't think this is one of the best markets heading into this week. We do look at this market every single week, but either buying it below the 1.1246 for a 1 or 2 day reversal back inside the range, or selling it above the 1.15403 for a 2 day reversal back inside the range. Those would be the two primary things I'd look for in euro dollar next week. But this market needs more time to pause and correct on a rolling weekly basis. Okay, so moving on to the portfolio selection, you'll see that actually portfolio selection this week looks very much like it was last week. We have a bunch of the risk-off markets at the top, really, except for the dollar, which is still kind of struggling because of the whole tariff situation. But the Swiss franc is extremely overbought on a rolling daily basis and a rolling weekly basis. The euro is still extremely overbought on a rolling weekly basis. It's overbought on a rolling daily basis. So it's light green. The light green bars here are overbought, dark green extremely overbought, and vice versa for red. So going into this week, there's no change in the assets that I'm going to be looking at trading. And like I said before, many times, when you get these kind of regime shifts, these can just keep rolling and rolling, and you can get the best opportunities in the same pairs over and over again kind of each week. And we saw this last week. We saw, just off the top of my head, Aussie franc took out its upper bound and reversed from the sell zone. Euro pound reversed from the buy zone last week. Euro New Zealand reversed from the buy zone last week. And I left a number of these on the table. I can't capture every single move every single week, but these were all opportunities. They were all there. In fact, I had a buy order sent out, two members on Euro New Zealand for the double bottom, and we got the Trump announcement, and instead of taking out the low for the double bottom, it just rallied straight up. So there's an example of a trade that I wasn't able to get hold of last week, but these opportunities are coming every single week. And so coming into this week, I'm going to be looking for exactly the same thing. I want to look for primarily Aussie shorts. Why? Because A, it's, quantitatively the best short heading into next week. But also there's a really good fundamental reason for that, right? We're seeing China in a trade war with the US, And this is going to be disruptive for the Chinese economy. And out of all the majors, you know, the Australian economy is going to suffer the most because China is its biggest import partner. So Aussie short as a theme is one of my favorite once again going into next week. And I'm going to be primarily looking for that versus the Swiss franc, versus the euro, versus the yen. I'm also interested in pound shorts once again. So pound franc, euro pound, and also pound yen we're going to be looking at. And again, you know, really we have the dollar or the New Zealand. Now, the thing with the dollar is if you're short the dollar and you get risk off, you can see the dollar snapping back. Now, last week it kind of underperformed and, you know, it wasn't a fantastic long opportunity, even though it was kind of overextended. But I think once again, on balance, you know, yes, euro dollar to the upside if you get that opportunity from the buy zone. But I think I would rather still not short the US dollar because of the fact that it is a risk off currency. And if we do get a sharp sell off in stocks, we may see a rebound in the dollar. So on that basis, the third market I still want to be looking for short opportunities in this week would be the New Zealand dollar. You could look for the CAD as well, but it would be New Zealand dollar for me. So to summarize then, we're going to be looking once again in today's video, Aussie franc to the downside, EurAusd to the upside, Aussie yen to the downside. Going to be looking at pound franc to the downside, euro pound to the upside, and pound yen to the downside. I'm also going to be primarily focused on New Zealand franc to the downside, Euro New Zealand to the upside, and New Zealand yen to the downside once again this week. Okay, so kicking off the watch list as always with crude oil. Now, crude oil is a short or do nothing. I'm just starting out on the weekly time horizon, so you can see once again, we've looked at this in previous videos. We had the big descending triangle breakout. The target is somewhere down, but between, you could say, kind of 40 to 45. Let's say 45 for argument's sake. So it does look like we've got the break, big sell-off, kind of capitulation. We're now getting the pullback. But just notice that the 67.81, the descending triangle low, sits right at the upper bound this week. So if we get a push higher into this, that's going to be a great place to start to look for a short. And this is definitely high up on my list for a potential short coming into this week from the sell zone. Okay, so zooming on the 4-hour chart, you can see the bottom of that descending triangle at the 67.81. What I want to see is I want to see crude oil pulling back. I want to see it enter the sell zone, breach the bottom of the descending triangle. And remember, that's a massive pattern. So it wouldn't be totally unexpected on a 4-hour time frame to breach, you know, through the low, chop around in this area and then reverse. And then what you see is maybe on a monthly time horizon, you know, or even on a weekly time horizon, it's just a single wick like this of a candle, right? But on the 4 hours, you break through, you know, you're in this area, maybe you continue to push and then you end up coming back down and you just have a weekly retest of the underside, right? Because it's a big pattern. So that's what I'll be looking for. I'll be looking for this to break above the 67.81 and start to run out of steam. So what I'm looking for is I'm looking for reversal patterns. I'm looking for double tops, head and shoulders in this case, because it's to the downside. And especially when you get this kind of a setup is quite good. You get the market kind of pushing above a major key area of, you know, resistance in this case. It comes back, it tests it, and then it attempts to rally. It stalls out. If I can look for a short somewhere in this area as it's starting to lack momentum, once this sells off and it takes out the prior lows, you tend to often see big liquidations. You know, in this case, 1 or 2 days is what I'm personally looking to capture. But that is a setup I'm going to be focused on next week, and I'll definitely be looking for that in real time with GMT members if we can get the break into the sell zone, which is above the 68.138. Not particularly interested in shorting this intra-week, but you can, you know, if it pulls back up and then it starts to break back down with momentum, that would be the second thing you could look for. Pulls back, it's that first test, kind of first hug of the moving average and move away gives you your bear flag. Profit taking target next week to the downside is the 60.76. And as always, although it's not expected, if we end up above the 71.82, this is where we become extremely overbought intra-week, so during the week. And I can, if I so wish, pull the trigger on a second position or an initial position from above here. But primarily, this is the setup I'm going to be looking for, and this is the main setup that I'm looking for every single week in real time with GMT members. Okay, so kicking off the Forex universe with the Swiss franc pairs, which is my favorite long theme heading into next week. In other words, being long the Swiss franc versus other currencies. And the number one currency I want to be to the short side or looking for short opportunities versus the franc is the Aussie dollar. So coming into this week, I do usually flash up, you know, upcoming news events, talk about trading around them, how I'm going to play, you know, interest rate decisions depending on the outcome, etc., etc. But next week, we don't really have any news. So we're really trading throughout this week without having to worry too much about what's going on in the economic calendar. So something that, you know, just clears the way for opportunities this week, which is pretty good. So I would like to see this push higher. I would like to see this turn oversold during the week because it's a market that I'm looking to be short. And as soon as we trade above the 0.5296, I'm looking left to see, do we have any confluence here? So now we're in the sell zone. Is there also anything which, is likely to assist this market with a reversal or a push lower? And of course, the obvious high is this. We don't really have anything over here just because of the sheer volatility. So it's pretty much nothing but air all the way back up to this low. But if we can push through into the sell zone once again at 0.5296, because we tested the sell zone, I think here, and reversed at the end of last week. I'm just doing that from memory. I can't remember 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure Aussie Frank tested right here. It was either here or here, but I'm pretty sure it was here towards the end of the week, and then we got the sell-off. So it didn't really do too much though, to be honest, last week. This market, this was a pair that didn't really move very far. But if we can push through the 0.5296 and take out this high, this is exactly where I'm going to be looking for buyers to start to struggle, start to run out of steam. I'm looking for those reversal patterns, and I will be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal back inside the range next week. And this would also complete a potential A, B, and a C, which of course is a corrective pattern after this momentum push lower. So yes, I might get 1 or 2 days out of this as a reversal next week, but also this could be a major turning point for the next leg down, all the way back down to the lows for those of you who like to hold positions, maybe for a couple of weeks at a time. Again, I like to be in and out the same day if possible, but it's not always possible that you're going to get paid out straight away. So often I will also hold these markets for 1 or 2 days, or maybe even a few days, in order to give it time, for those reversals. Again, I'm looking to capture 1 or 2 days myself, but I would not be surprised to see this market turn at this high and end up back down at the low over the next few weeks. Next is pound franc. Very much like Aussie franc, this is a short or do nothing for me. I cannot buy this market next week under any circumstances. So what I want to see is I want to see it push up. I want to see it trade into the sell zone, which is above the 1.09981. This is where the odds turn in our favor for a reversal to the downside next week. And if we can find confluence, with key area of resistance, this is going to increase the probabilities of buyers, struggling and reversing. So again, we're not really looking at reversals per se because the overall move is to the downside. And what this means is, essentially every time it pushes higher, I'm looking for a reversal. Every time it pushes higher, I'm looking for a reversal. Every time it pushes higher, I'm looking for a reversal. Why? Because the overall direction is this way in pound franc. So if we can push above the 1.09981 and take out this high, this is primarily where I'm going to be looking next week for a reversal to the downside. I want to see buyers push into this high and again start to struggle. They could break through it, and try and retest it and struggle, or they could just trade into it and struggle to even break through. Either way, I'm going to be looking for momentum to fade, double top, head and shoulders. I'm going to be looking for that 1 or 2 day reversal back inside the range. If we fail to get there, as always, you can, for those of you who like Fibonacci, etc., you can look for the break back below the moving average, and you can look for that bear flag setup, first pull back into the profit taking zone to the downside at the 1.0707. And third and final thing, as always, the 1.11432 is where we turn extremely overbought during the week, and it's the place where I can pull the trigger for a second time to the short side if I so wish, or if I'm not involved in the short, this is also a great place from above here to start to look for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the downside. But most of the time these markets won't take out these levels, so these are really kind of backup plans or plan Bs. The primary setup is always above or below the first upper or lower bound. And finally we have New Zealand franc. Again, I can be short or do nothing. I cannot buy this market. And the primary short will come from above the 0.49355. Now, I look to the left here. Again, there's nothing but air up to this low. Why? Because the sell-off was so sharp that we've got these big candles to the downside. So what I want to see then coming into here is I kind of want to see the market creating its own resistance. In other words, it pushes in, it kind of tests it, it probes it in the sell zone. Maybe we get the first kind of sell-off with a bit of profit taking, and then it attempts to rally through the highs. And maybe it fails again, and then maybe it tries again. And this is where we end up with perhaps a double top somewhere in this area, and then the liquidation back inside. So that's what I'm going to be primarily looking at executing on in real time next week. And if we end up above the 0.50213, what does that mean? It means we've become extremely overbought during the week. It's the second place I can pull the trigger on a short if I so wish, because if I short it here, I can't short it again until it comes above this level. Otherwise, what really I'm kind of doing is I'm just doubling my position. Let's say it comes up here, pulls back, and then pushes higher, and I short and I short. really all I've done is I've increased my first position by 5 times. You know, the probabilities haven't necessarily changed for a reversal because we're still just above the upper bound. But once we trade above the second upper bound, the odds greatly increase, roughly from about 7 out of 10 to 9 out of 10. These are the pre-market pricing probabilities of the market reversing back inside the gold range. So if that's the case, if the odds have actually increased above the 0.50213 of a reversal, then I can add a second short position if I so wish. Make sense? So again, I don't expect it to take these out, but if it does take that out as a plan B, I can pull the trigger on a second position. As always, if we end up trading back down below the moving average, for those of you who like Fibonacci, you can look for that kind of bear flag setup. First pull back into the moving average, and the profit taking zone is the 0.4764. Okay, so moving on to the euro pairs, starting of course with EurAusd. The buy zone sits down below the 1.75773. So what I want to see primarily is I want to see EurAusd coming down, trading below the 1.75773. And again, there's not really any kind of significant low until here. So this would be a market, again, I'd be looking for it to form its kind of own support, start to lack momentum, and I'm going to be looking for that 1 or 2 day reversal, just as we saw Euro New Zealand, just as we saw Euro Pound trading into the buy zone last week and bouncing. Going to be looking for that exact same setup for 1 or 2 days to the upside next week. If we start to trade down, you can, of course, as always, look for that momentum break back above the moving average, and then it kind of consolidates. Sometimes it touches it, sometimes it just consolidates sideways into it before the kind of push higher. So again, the moving average follows it. We get that kind of consolidation. That would be your bull flag setup into the profit taking target, the 1.81469. And the 1.72924 is the level which, if we trade below it, we become extremely oversold during the week. It's the place where I can take a second long opportunity if I so wish. Next is Euro Pound. I'm going to be looking for exactly the same thing as we saw last week. Euro Pound came down, traded into the buy zone. This was a market I could be long or do nothing, and we got this really nice reversal and bounce back inside the range. So I'm going to be looking for that again. This also looks like a bit of an A, B, C. So if we come down and trade below the 0.84878, this is the area next week I'm going to be looking for those double bottoms, inverse head and shoulder patterns on the lower time frames, usually, you know, 1 hour, 15 minutes, 5 minutes, even 1 minute, just if you want to refine them. But I'm going to be looking for those reversal patterns. I'm going to be looking for that liquidation, just as we saw here, from here to here last week. Going to be looking for this reversal back inside the range for 1 or 2 days worth of return. If we start to trade down to this level and instead of reaching it, you get that breakout with momentum. It has to be, you know, with momentum above it. So it breaks with momentum. This one didn't even pull back until here. It was so strong. But you're looking for that break. If you do want to trade during the week, you're looking for the breakthrough. The moving average follows it, and you'll probably see this as a kind of breakout across here. Pulls back into the moving average. You can look for that bull flag setup. Profit taking target is the 0.8648 for any intra-week longs. And of course, the 0.8407, I don't expect it to come down here, but if it trades down here reactively, I can pull the trigger on a long position. It's the second place I get the ability to do that in Euro Pound next week. And the final Euro pair is Euro New Zealand. Again, looking for exactly the same thing as last week. We came down, we traded into the buy zone, and we had a really nice bounce. We actually came down again a second time into the buy zone last week, and we bounced again. So I am going to be looking for this to continue down, take out the lower bound at the 1.88745. What I like about this is, unlike last week where we had kind of nothing but air, it's still reversed. As you can see, it didn't trade into any kind of key support here, and we still reversed just because we traded into the buy zone. But if we trade into the buy zone this week, there's a really nice low right here. So I will be primarily looking for a test of this low, looking for sellers to kind of start to stall out, and I'll be looking for that reversal for 1 or 2 days back inside the range. If we end up below the 1.85806, I don't expect this to happen. We turn extremely oversold during the week. You'd need some kind of catalyst really to do that. Without any catalyst next week, that's pretty much almost certainly not going to happen. But it is the second place reactively I could pull the trigger on a 1 or 2 day reversal long position in EurAusd. And the third and final thing, again, if we start to make our way down and you get the reversal intra-week, so it breaks through, and look at how this just hugs it and then starts to move away. You can look for that, breaks through, pulls back into the moving average, and you get that bull flag set up into the profit taking zone next week, which is at 1.9462 and above. And wrapping up the Forex universe with the yen pairs before we move on to gold and silver. I can only be short in Aussie yen or do nothing. Cannot buy this market next week. What I want to see is I want to see this pushing up through the 92.52. Once we trade through this level, there is a nice high right here in the 4-hour time frame. See this? This is pretty good. And what I like about this high is it sits on the underside of a prior low. So this becomes a really nice area at this high and at this prior low to look for resistance. So I'm going to look for the market to push into the sell zone, trade into this area here, and this is where I'm going to start to look for a 1 or 2 day liquidation back inside the range next week in the direction of the overall trend. If for whatever reason we end up above the 94.38, again, unlikely to happen unless we get some kind of unexpected catalyst, this is the second place I can look for a reversal pattern and a setup for a 1 or 2 day reversal back inside the bigger range. And the third and final thing, of course, we start to make our way back and we get a fast market. In other words, it's so strong to the downside, we can't actually take out the upper bound. That's where you get your breakdown below the moving average. And then you get that kind of bear flag set up into the lower bound at the 88.79. Next is pound yen. Again, I can either be short or do nothing. And another really nice technical setup in the sense that we have the sell zone sitting right at the prior low, which is broken. So it would be support turning resistance over here at the 192.20. So I would like to see pound yen coming back, continuing this kind of A, B, C, kind of making its way higher. If we do start to get a deeper test or a deeper correction and a test of the 192.20, this is where I'm going to be looking next week for head and shoulders pattern, a double top for momentum to fade, and I'm going to be looking for that 1 or 2 day reversal back inside the range. So again, out of 5 days, looking to capture 1 to 2. And doing that in every single asset. So of course, you're not going to capture 1 or 2 days in every asset, but in every asset, I'm looking for potentially 1 or 2 days. So the second thing is if pound yen ends up above the 195.35, although I don't expect this to happen, this is very unlikely, but if we do end up here reactively and we start to take out this high, especially, this is the second place I can look for a 1 or 2 day reversal. And the third and final thing is, let's say we have this A, B, and then we have this kind of testing the prior high here and maybe this high, and it starts to stall out here. So we don't get the market coming all the way back. If you're trading kind of Fibonacci stuff, you can look for the breakdown, and that would be your sign to start to look for that pullback. And the sell-off in this case down to the buy zone, which is just a profit-taking zone in this, because I can only be short or do nothing in pound yen, but into the profit-taking zone of the 185.90. And last but not least, we have New Zealand yen. Again, I can either be short or do nothing. Buying this market is not an option for me. I would like to see this trade up into the sell zone above the 86.21, and this is a nice high right here. We also have another high just above it. So this kind of area, if you just do a kind of box between these two levels, this is going to be a really good place to start to look for buyers to push into the sell zone. They're pushing against the overall trend. They're pushing into an area now where the market has become overbought during the week and is viable for a snapback. And they're also pushing into prior resistance. So what you're going to find is, as buyers start to struggle, why are they struggling? Because anybody who bought down here and is making money, they're pulling their positions. They're selling what they've bought to book their profits. And then you get new sellers coming in, and this causes the liquidation back inside the range. I don't expect to end up above the 87.94, but if we do, it's the second place I can pull the trigger on a potential short position. And like with the other pairs, if you start to make your way up, but then reverse sharply down, and you could look at this maybe as a breakout of this kind of channel. Breakdown, moving average follows it, you get the pullback, and that's your bear flag set up into the profit taking zone at the 82.75. Okay, so wrapping up the video as always with gold and silver, starting with gold, and I've zoomed out here on Hedge Dash so you can see some of the other quantitative data. We are extremely overbought on a rolling daily basis. We are extremely overbought on a rolling weekly basis, and we are overbought on a rolling monthly basis, which means that gold is probably close to a near-term top quantitatively, one which could last anywhere between a few weeks to even a few months. So we're kind of reaching that point where we are super extended, but it could just edge higher a little bit more. So going into next week, I don't want to short gold. I'm not a big fan of shorting gold. I only really want to be focused on the long side because we could see it go up a little bit more. But what I don't want to do with gold next week certainly would be trade it in between the range, because there's a very good chance that we snap back, certainly on a rolling daily basis and even a rolling weekly basis as we've just seen. So I do think there's a good chance we're going to come down and take out the 3228.44, which is the buy zone in gold next week. If we take this level out, this is where I will start to look next week potentially for double bottoms, inverse head and shoulder for a 1 or 2 day liquidation to the upside. If we get a big sell-off and for whatever reason we end up down below the 3130.62, this would be the second place, although I don't expect it to take this level out. This would be the second place I could look for a 1 or 2 day reversal back inside the bigger gold range as well. So bullish or nothing for me next week in gold. I can only look for long opportunities, but I would not look for long opportunities between the range because quantitatively, this thing is at risk of snapping back into its lower bound next week. And finally, we have silver. Now, I would like to use silver reactively next week with gold and in the opposite direction, because gold can go up at the same time as the dollar, but if the dollar snaps back or is overextended to the downside and kind of pauses or pushes higher, silver is going to suffer even if gold goes up. So I only want to be long or doing nothing in gold next week, but with silver, it's the opposite. So again, I would not want to really trade this in between the levels next week because of the overextensions. But if we end up seeing silver above the upper bound, what that means is gold has also probably traded into its upper bound. And if that's the case, I'm not going to be looking at shorting gold, but I would consider shorting silver from above the 34.07. We have a nice high here, a nice high here, and another nice high here, and another nice high here. So there's multiple highs over here where I'd be looking. Do we trade straight through this, for example, and into this? Do we trade straight through both of these and then start to lack momentum at the third one? Either way, I will be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal back inside the range next week. I don't expect silver to end up above the 35.63, but if it does, this would be the second place. Whether I'm short already or not, I could look for a 1 or 2 day reversal back inside the bigger range. And of course, you know, the intra-week stuff in gold and silver, I don't think trading between these levels next week is a great idea, again, because of how extended some of these markets are. So I just want to wrap up today's video by saying thank you for watching, of course, and happy Easter to everybody who's celebrating. We will be back next Saturday with a brand new weekly Forex forecast, and every single setup that I've spoken about today, I will be looking at executing on in real time with GMT members next week. So have a great weekend, have a nice Easter, and I'll see you all next Saturday. So that is it from me for today, guys. As always, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, why not consider joining us in the GMT training room each day, where I look at the best markets as well as sharing real-time setups that I'm personally looking at trading with members as part of our GMT training program. Don't forget, you can also get a 2-week free trial to the cutting-edge hedge-trading app used in today's video by heading over to www.hedge-.com. Access to the cutting-edge hedge-platform is included with every GMT membership.